The harsh winter winds of 1877 whipped across the platform at Cedar Springs Station as Lillian Abernathy clutched the legal document in her trembling hands. She had just signed away her future to a stranger, a cowboy named Vincent Holloway, who owned a ranch somewhere in Wyoming Territory. The train whistle shrieked, startling her so badly she nearly dropped the marriage certificate. There was no turning back now. Lillian took a steadying breath and stared down at the paper that had sealed her fate. The journey from Boston had been grueling, and her corset felt too tight against her ribs as panic threatened to overwhelm her. What if this man was cruel? What if the advertisement she'd answered in the Eastern newspaper had been filled with lies? Her parents' deaths had left her with nothing but debts and a single trunk of possessions. This marriage by correspondence was her only option. Last boarding call for Wyoming Territory. The conductor shouted, his voice barely audible over the engine's roar. Lillian gathered her skirts and climbed aboard, the weight of her decision pressing down on her shoulders like the heavy wool coat she wore. 22 years old and traveling alone to marry, a man she'd never met, her hands wouldn't stop shaking even after she found her seat. The journey stretched on for days. Lillian watched the landscape transform from the familiar greenery of the east to the vast, intimidating expanse of the west. With each passing mile, her anxiety grew. Vincent's letters had been kind enough, but paper could hide a multitude of flaws. What sort of man needed to send away for a wife? When the train finally chugged into Sweetwater Junction, Wyoming Territory, Lillian's heart hammered against her ribs. This desolate-looking town was to be her new home. The platform was crowded with rugged men in dusty clothes, hard-faced women, and a few curious children. She scanned the crowd, searching for someone who matched the vague description Vincent had provided in his letters. Miss Abernathy. A deep voice came from behind her. Lillian turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His dark blonde hair was neatly trimmed, and though his clothes were well worn, they were clean. He removed his hat, revealing a respectful demeanor that instantly put her somewhat at ease. "Mr. Holloway?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He nodded, a gentle smile crossing his features. "Vincent Holloway, madam. Welcome to Wyoming." He didn't move to touch her, maintaining a respectful distance. "Let me help you with your trunk." As he lifted her trunk effortlessly, Lillian studied him surreptitiously. He wasn't what she'd expected. There was a quiet strength about him, but none of the roughness she'd feared. His hands were calloused from hard work, yet he handled her belongings with care. "My wagon's just over here," he said, leading the way. "It's about 2 hours to the ranch from town. I hope the journey wasn't too difficult." It was. "Long," Lillian managed, following him through the dusty street. Vincent helped her into the wagon with a gentle hand at her elbow, then secured her trunk in the back. As they pulled away from town, an uncomfortable silence settled between them. "I know this isn't easy," Vincent said finally, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Coming all this way to marry a stranger. I want you to know that I'll honor our agreement, but if you find you can't, if you wish to return east, I'll provide the fare." Lillian stared at him in surprise. None of her friends who had become mail-order brides had been offered such consideration. "That's very kind, Mr. Holloway, but I've made my choice." Her voice sounded braver than she felt. "Vincent, please," he said. "After all, we're to be married tomorrow if you're still willing once you've seen the ranch and had a chance to rest." As they traveled, Vincent pointed out landmarks and told her about the land. His ranch, the Double H, was modest but growing. He had a small herd of cattle, some horses, and hopes for the future. He spoke with such quiet passion about his plans that Lillian found herself drawn in despite her reservations. The landscape, was unlike anything she'd ever seen, vast open plains giving way to rolling hills with distant mountains on the horizon. The emptiness of it all was both terrifying and exhilarating. "There it is," Vincent said as they crested a hill. "Home." The ranch came into view, a sturdy log cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, a large barn, and several outbuildings. It wasn't grand, but it looked solid and well-maintained. A small creek ran nearby, and a few trees offered shade. In the distance, cattle grazed on the open range. "It's not much compared to Boston, I imagine," Vincent said, a note of apology in his voice. "It's lovely," Lillian said, and was surprised to find she meant it. After months of boarding in cramped rooms following her parents' deaths, the open space and clean air felt like freedom. As they approached, the door to the cabin opened and an older woman stepped out, wiping her hands on an apron. "That's Mrs. Gunderson," Vincent explained. "She's been helping me get ready for your arrival. She'll stay on for a few days to help you settle in if you'd like." Lillian nodded gratefully. At least she wouldn't be alone with this stranger right away. Mrs. Gunderson welcomed her warmly, ushering her inside while Vincent took care of the horses. The cabin was simple but comfortable, a main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, and two doors that presumably led to bedrooms. "You'll be staying in here until after the ceremony," Mrs. Gunderson said, showing her to a small but clean bedroom. "Mr. Holloway, he's been working for months to make it nice for you. Made that quilt himself, he did." Lillian touched the colorful patchwork quilt in surprise. "He made this. His mother taught him before she passed. Said a man should know how to care for himself." Mrs. Gunderson smiled. "He's a good man, Miss Abernathy. Quiet but good." That night, Lillian sat at the dinner table with Vincent and Mrs. Gunderson, trying to hide her exhaustion and anxiety. Vincent seemed to sense her discomfort and kept the conversation light, telling her about the neighbors and the town, careful not to overwhelm her. After dinner, he excused himself to check on the animals, leaving Lillian with Mrs. Gunderson. "He's giving you space," the older woman explained as they washed the dishes. "Wants you to be comfortable, not pressured." "I expected." Lillian hesitated. "I'm not sure what I expected. Most men out here, they want a wife for cooking and children, nothing more. Vincent, he's different. Wants a partner, someone to share the dream with." Mrs. Gunderson handed her a cup of tea. "He's lonely, but he's patient. Give him a chance." That night, alone in her room, Lillian stared at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the prairie. Everything had happened so quickly: the desperate answer to the advertisement, the exchange of letters, the hasty journey west. Now she was here, about to marry a man she'd just met. Yet, something about Vincent's quiet dignity gave her hope that perhaps she hadn't made a terrible mistake. The next morning dawned clear and cool. Mrs. Gunderson helped Lillian dress in her best gown, a simple blue dress that matched her eyes. Her hands trembled as she pinned up her chestnut hair. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Gunderson assured her. "A proper bride." Vincent was waiting for her by the wagon, dressed in clean clothes with his hair neatly combed. For a moment, Lillian saw something in his eyes, a flash of admiration and perhaps something deeper, before he ducked his head shyly. "You look lovely, Miss Abernathy," he said softly. The ride to town was quiet, each lost in their own thoughts. The ceremony at the small church was brief, attended only by Mrs. Gunderson, the minister and his wife, and a few townspeople curious about Vincent Holloway's mail-order bride. When Lillian's hands shook as she signed the marriage certificate, Vincent covered them briefly with his own, warm, steady, and reassuring. His touch was gentle, his eyes kind. "I'll do right by you," he whispered, so only she could hear. "I promise." The return to the ranch as Mrs. Holloway felt surreal. Vincent helped her down from the wagon with the same respectful care he'd shown since her arrival. Mrs. Gunderson had prepared a special dinner, and a small cake sat on the table as a celebration. That night, when they were finally alone, Vincent took her hands in his. "I know this isn't the marriage you dreamed of," he said quietly, "but I want you to know that I'll treat you with respect. I'll never force you to do anything you're not ready for. We can take our time getting to know each other." Tears filled Lillian's eyes at his unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she whispered. Vincent nodded and showed her to their bedroom. "I'll sleep in the barn tonight," he said. "Give you time to adjust." As he turned to leave, Lillian called after him. "Vincent, why did you send for a bride, a man like you could have found a wife locally?" He paused at the door, his shoulders tense. "The women here know my past," he said simply. "Good night, Lillian." The next few weeks passed in a blur of new experiences. Vincent was true to his word, sleeping in the barn for the first week until Lillian hesitantly suggested he return to the house. Even then, he made a pallet on the floor, giving her the bed. During the days, Vincent patiently taught Lillian about ranch life, how to gather eggs without upsetting the hens, how to milk the cow, how to tend the kitchen garden that provided much of their food. He never criticized her mistakes, just gently showed her again, his hands steady and sure beside her trembling ones. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, gradually sharing stories of their lives. Lillian told him about growing up in Boston, about her father's business failures and her mother's decline after his death. Vincent spoke of his childhood on a small farm in Missouri, his parents' deaths from fever, and his journey west to start fresh. But there was something he wasn't telling her, some shadow that crossed his face when certain topics arose. When she asked about his comment regarding his past, he simply changed the subject. As the days passed, Lillian found herself watching Vincent when he wasn't aware, the way the sun highlighted the gold in his hair as he worked with the horses, the gentleness in his hands as he tended a newborn calf, the quiet concentration on his face as he repaired a fence. Despite her initial fears, she found herself drawn to this quiet, hardworking man who treated her with such respect. One morning, about a month after her arrival, Lillian was hanging laundry when she heard riders approaching. Vincent was out checking the herd, and she felt a flutter of panic at being alone. 3 men rode up, their expressions unfriendly as they dismounted. The leader, a heavy-set man with a thick mustache, eyed her coldly. "So Holloway finally got himself a woman," he said, his tone making the words sound vulgar. "Didn't think any decent woman would have him." "My husband will be back soon," Lillian said, trying to keep her voice steady. "May I help you with something?" "Your husband," the man sneered. "Did he tell you what he did before he came here? Did he tell you about the men he killed?" Lillian's heart pounded. "I think you should leave." "Not until I've said my piece." The man took a step closer. "Your fine husband was a gunslinger, madam, hired his gun to the highest bidder. He killed my brother in cold blood." "That's not true, Blackwood." Vincent's voice cut through the tension as he rode up, his expression hard but controlled. "Your brother drew first, and you know it. I was cleared by the law." The man named Blackwood spat on the ground. "The law may have let you go, but I haven't forgotten." "This is between you and me," Vincent said, dismounting but keeping his distance. "Leave my wife out of it." "Just wanted her to know what kind of man she married," Blackwood said with a nasty smile. He turned to Lillian. "Ask him how many notches he has on his gun belt, madam." "Get off my land," Vincent said, his voice quiet but with an edge Lillian had never heard before. The 3 men mounted up, Blackwood pausing to deliver a final threat. "This isn't over, Holloway." After they rode away, silence hung heavy between Lillian and Vincent. She stared at him, seeing him differently now, noticing for the first time the way he wore his gun, low and tied down, the the mark of a man who knew how to use it. "Is it true?" she asked finally. "Were you a gunfighter?" Vincent met her gaze, his blue eyes troubled. "Yes," he said simply, but not like he made it sound. "I worked as security for mining companies, banks, sometimes ranchers during territory disputes. I never shot a man who wasn't trying to kill me first." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to." He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "But I was afraid you'd leave before you had a chance to know me. I've been trying to outrun that life for 3 years now. I came here, bought this land, started building something honest." His voice dropped. "I thought maybe with enough time and distance, it wouldn't matter anymore." Lillian tried to reconcile this new information with the gentle man she'd come to know. "How many men have you killed?" Vincent's jaw tightened. "4. All in self-defense. Blackwood's brother was the last. He tried to rob the bank I was guarding in Cheyenne. Shot the teller before I stopped him." Lillian turned away, needing time to process this revelation. "I need to finish the laundry," she said, her voice strained. Vincent nodded, respecting her need for space. "I'll be in the barn if you need me." That night, dinner was a silent affair. When Vincent excused himself to sleep in the barn again, Lillian didn't stop him. She lay awake for hours, thinking about everything she'd learned. The man Blackwood described seemed nothing like the Vincent. She knew the man who had made her a quilt, who spoke softly to frightened calves, who treated her with nothing but respect and kindness. The next morning, Lillian rose early and found Vincent already at work in the corral, breaking a young horse. She watched from the porch as he worked with the animal patient, firm but never cruel, gradually earning the horse's trust. It struck her that this was how he had approached their marriage as well. When he finished, she met him at the water pump with a dipper of cool water. "Thank you," he said, surprised by the gesture. "I've been thinking," Lillian said, choosing her words carefully. "You've been honest with me since I arrived about the ranch, about giving me time, about everything except your past. I understand why you kept it secret, but I'd like to know the whole truth now." Vincent nodded, wiping his brow. "Fair enough. After chores, I'll tell you everything." That evening, as they sat by the fire, Vincent told her the full story: how he'd lost his parents and farm during the war, how he'd drifted west with nothing but a good horse and the shooting skills his father had taught him, how he'd taken work as a guard because it paid better than cowboying. He spoke of the weight of taking lives, even in self-defense, and how he'd finally walked away after the incident with Blackwood's brother. "I wanted something different," he said, staring into the flames. "Something that created life instead of taking it. I used everything I'd saved to buy this land, these cattle. I've been trying to build something good here." He looked up at her, his eyes vulnerable. "When I sent for a bride, I hoped for a fresh start, a chance to be judged for the man I am now, not the one I was." Lillian studied him in the firelight, seeing both versions of him now: the dangerous man he had been and the gentle one he was striving to become. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally. "I needed to know." "Are you afraid of me now?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Lillian considered the question honestly. "No," she realized. "I'm not afraid of you. I've never felt safer than I have with you, Vincent." Something in his expression eased, and that night when he prepared to leave for the barn, Lillian stopped him. "Stay," she said softly. "This is your home too." He made his pallet on the floor as usual, but it felt like a significant step forward. As spring bloomed across the prairie, their relationship slowly deepened. Vincent continued to teach Lillian about ranch life, and she found unexpected joy in the work, satisfaction in the bread she baked, pride in the garden she tended, even pleasure in learning to ride the gentle mare Vincent had trained especially for her. Lillian began accompanying Vincent on his rounds of the property, learning the boundaries and features of what was now her home too. On these rides, Vincent seemed most at ease, pointing out wildlife, telling her stories of the land, even occasionally laughing a rich, warm sound that made her heart beat faster. One afternoon, as they rested their horses by the creek that marked the northern boundary of their property, Vincent suddenly grew serious. "Blackwood won't let this go," he said. "He's had it in for me since the shooting. I've heard he's been drinking heavily in town, making threats." "What can we do?" Lillian asked, fear tightening her chest. "I've considered selling up, moving somewhere new," Vincent admitted. "But this land, it's become part of me, and now with you here," he hesitated. "I don't want to uproot you again, especially if—" "If what?" Vincent looked away. "If you're starting to feel at home here." Lillian realized with surprise that she was. This wild, beautiful country had worked its way into her heart, as had the quiet man beside her. "I am," she said softly. "This is becoming home to me." Vincent's eyes, when they met hers, held a warmth that made her breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her, but he simply nodded and suggested they head back to the ranch. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Lillian found the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind. "Why did you really send for a bride, Vincent? The truth." He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and intimate in the gathering darkness. "Loneliness," he admitted. "Not just for companionship. I wanted someone to share this with, the land, the work, the dream. Someone who might see beyond what I was to what I'm trying to become." He turned to her, his face half in shadow. "I never expected someone like you, Lillian. Someone so brave and determined. Someone who makes me want to be better than I am." The honesty in his voice moved her deeply. Without thinking, she reached out and covered his hand with hers. His skin was warm and rough beneath her fingers. "You are a good man, Vincent Holloway," she said firmly. "The past is the past." He turned his hand to clasp hers, and they sat in comfortable silence as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. The peace of that moment was shattered the next day when a neighboring rancher rode in with news that Blackwood and his men had been boasting in town about teaching Holloway a lesson. "They were loading up on ammunition," the neighbor warned. "Might be nothing but drunk talk, but thought you should know." After the man left, Vincent's face was grim as he checked his rifle and pistol. "I want you to ride to the Petersons' place if there's trouble," he told Lillian. "They're about 5 miles east. They'll look after you." "I'm not leaving you to face them alone," Lillian protested. "This isn't your fight." "I'm your wife," she said firmly. "That makes it my fight too." Vincent looked at her with a mixture of pride and concern. "I never wanted to bring violence to your door. You didn't. They did." Lillian straightened her shoulders. "My father taught me to shoot before he died. I'm not helpless." Vincent tested her claim, setting up targets behind the barn. To his surprise, Lillian proved to be a decent shot with his lighter rifle. "My father believed women should know how to defend themselves," she explained. "It was one of his more progressive ideas." For the next few days, they lived in a state of tense readiness. Vincent showed Lillian hiding places and escape routes, and they took turns keeping watch. But as days passed with no sign of Blackwood, they began to hope the threat had been empty talk. Then, one afternoon while Vincent was checking on a sick calf in the far pasture, Lillian heard riders approaching. Looking out the window, her heart froze. Blackwood and 4 men, all armed, riding hard toward the cabin. Grabbing the rifle Vincent had left for her, Lillian positioned herself by the window. As the men dismounted, she called out, "Mr. Blackwood, my husband isn't here. Please leave our property." Blackwood laughed. "Don't worry, madam, we'll wait for him. In fact, we'll make ourselves comfortable in your home while we do." He gestured to his men. Search the place." As two men approached the door, Lillian fired a warning shot into the ground near their feet. They jumped back in surprise. "The next one won't miss," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've sent for help. The sheriff will be here soon." It was a bluff. The sheriff's office was in town, hours away. "You've got spirit, I'll give you that," Blackwood called back. "But you're outnumbered. We just want Holloway." "You can walk away from this." "This is my home," Lillian replied. "I'm not going anywhere." For several tense minutes they remained at a standoff. Then Lillian heard the sound she'd been praying for, hoofbeats approaching fast. Vincent appeared on the ridge, rifle ready, taking in the situation in an instant. Instead of charging in, he called out from his position of advantage. "Blackwood, this ends now. You want me, not her. Ride out, all of you, and I'll meet you in town tomorrow. We'll settle this properly." "No more delays, Holloway," Blackwood shouted back. "You've hidden behind the law long enough." What happened next unfolded with terrifying speed. One of Blackwood's men fired at Vincent, the shot going wide. Vincent returned fire, hitting the man in the shoulder. In the chaos that followed, Blackwood and his remaining men scattered for cover, shooting wildly. Lillian kept her position at the window, firing carefully when she had a clear shot, more to keep them pinned down than to hit anyone. She could see Vincent working his way closer, using the terrain for cover. A bullet splintered the window frame beside her, showering her with fragments. She ducked down, heart pounding, then risked another look. One of the men was creeping toward the back of the cabin. Taking careful aim, she fired, clipping his leg. He howled and scrambled back. Outside, Vincent had managed to disarm one of the men and was locked in a standoff with Blackwood and the last of his companions. Suddenly, more riders appeared on the horizon, neighbors who had heard the gunfire and come to investigate. Seeing that they were now outnumbered, Blackwood's last companion threw down his weapon. But Blackwood himself refused to surrender, his face contorted with hate as he aimed at Vincent. "You're finished, Holloway," he snarled. Time seemed to slow as Lillian saw Blackwood's finger tighten on the trigger. Without conscious thought, she raised her rifle and fired. Her bullet caught Blackwood in the arm, spoiling his aim. His shot went wild, and before he could recover, Vincent had him disarmed and on the ground. The neighbors helped secure Blackwood and his men, and one rode for the sheriff. As the chaos subsided, Vincent rushed to Lillian, taking her in his arms with a desperation that spoke volumes. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands gently checking her for injuries. "Just some scratches from the window," she assured him, suddenly aware of the sting on her cheek where a splinter had caught her. "I'm fine," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You saved my life." "You would have done the same for me," she said simply. Vincent's arms tightened around her. "I was so afraid for you," he confessed, "when I saw them surrounding the cabin." "I was afraid too," Lillian admitted, "but I couldn't let them hurt you or take our home." "Our home," Vincent repeated, something like wonder in his voice. He pulled back slightly to look at her, his eyes intense. "Lillian, I know our marriage started as an arrangement, but I need you to know," he was interrupted by the arrival of more neighbors coming to check on them. The moment passed, but the look in his eyes stayed with Lillian as they dealt with the aftermath of the attack. It was late evening by the time the sheriff arrived, took statements, and departed with Blackwood and his men in custody. The neighbors helped repair the broken window and stayed for a meal before heading home, leaving Vincent and Lillian alone at last. As they cleaned up from the impromptu dinner, Vincent was unusually quiet. When Lillian asked if he was in pain, suspecting he might be hiding an injury, he shook his head. "I could have lost you today," he said finally, setting down the plate he was drying. "All because of my past. Or we could have lost each other," Lillian countered. "Life has no guarantees, Vincent." Not in Boston, not here. You were so brave, he said softly. I never expected that a city girl from Boston would fight for her home. Lillian smiled slightly. Neither did I until today, but that's what this place has become to me, home, and you. She hesitated, then gathered her courage. You've become much more than just the man I made an arrangement with. Vincent's eyes darkened with emotion. Lillian, he said, his voice husky. I've been trying to keep my distance to give you time. But today, when I thought I might lose you, I realized I can't pretend anymore. I love you. The words hung in the air between them, powerful and transformative. Lillian felt something unlock in her chest, a warmth that had been growing for weeks, now finally free to bloom. I love you too, she whispered. Vincent closed the distance between them in 2 strides, gathering her in his arms. Their first real kiss was tender and questioning at first, then deepening with months of restrained longing. When they finally parted, both were breathless. I never dared hope you would come to feel this way, Vincent confessed, his forehead resting against hers. Neither did I, Lillian admitted. I was so afraid when I came here, signing that paper with shaking hands. But you've treated me with such respect, such kindness. How could I not fall in love with you? That night, for the first time, they truly shared the bedroom as husband and wife. Vincent's touch was gentle and reverent, his passion tempered by tenderness. As they learned each other's bodies in the soft glow of the oil lamp, Lillian marveled at how far they had come from their awkward first meeting at the train station. In the quiet aftermath, lying in his arms, Lillian felt a peace she hadn't known was possible. Do you think Blackwood will come back? She asked, the day's events still echoing in her mind. Vincent's arms tightened around her. The sheriff said he'll face serious charges this time. And the neighbors all witnessed what happened. I think his vendetta has run its course. Good, Lillian murmured, nestling closer, because I have plans for our future here. Do you now? Vincent's voice held amusement and curiosity. What kind of plans? Expanding the garden. Adding to the house eventually, perhaps. She hesitated, then continued softly, filling those extra rooms with children someday. Vincent went very still, then tilted her face up to his. The hope in his eyes made her heart swell. You want that? A family with me? Very much, she assured him. Not immediately, perhaps, but yes. I want to build a life here with you, Vincent. A real life, not just an arrangement. I want that too, he said, his voice thick with emotion. More than anything. As spring turned to summer, the Double H Ranch flourished under their combined efforts. Vincent taught Lillian to ride better, and she accompanied him more often on his rounds of the property. Together, they expanded the garden and added chickens to their livestock. In town, people gradually accepted Lillian as Vincent's wife, and the story of how she had defended their home against Blackwood earned her a respect that surprised her. True to Vincent's prediction, Blackwood was sentenced to prison for the attack. With that shadow lifted, Vincent seemed to finally release the last of his tension about his past. He began making plans for the future with a new confidence, talking of expanding their herd, breeding horses, adding to the house. One evening in late summer, as they sat on the porch watching a spectacular sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Vincent took Lillian's hand. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a simple gold band with a small diamond. When we married, I couldn't afford a proper ring. I've been saving up to get you one worthy of you. Lillian gasped as he slid the ring onto her finger where it nestled against her plain gold wedding band. It's beautiful, she whispered, tears filling her eyes. Not as beautiful as you, Vincent replied, his voice husky. I want to do this right, Lillian. We started as strangers making a practical arrangement, but you've become everything to me. He knelt before her, still holding her hand. Will you stay by my side, not because of a paper you signed with shaking hands, but because you choose to? Will you continue to be my wife, my partner, my heart? Tears spilled down Lillian's cheeks as she nodded. Yes, she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Always yes. As the seasons changed, so did the ranch. Their herd grew, as did their reputation for quality stock. Vincent's gentle way with horses attracted buyers from as far as Denver, and Lillian's organizational skills helped turn their modest operation into a growing success. They added a room to the cabin, and then another, transforming it into a proper home. When Lillian discovered she was expecting their first child the following spring, Vincent's joy knew no bounds. He carried her around the house laughing, then immediately set about building a cradle from wood he'd been saving for a special project. Their daughter, Grace, was born on a crisp autumn morning with the help of a midwife from town and Mrs. Gunderson, who returned to assist. Vincent paced outside until the first cry rang out, then rushed in to find Lillian exhausted but radiant, a tiny bundle in her arms. "We have a daughter," she whispered as he knelt beside the bed. Vincent's hands shook as he gently touched the baby's cheek. "She's perfect," he breathed, awe in his voice. "Just like her mother." As Grace grew, so did their family. 2 years later, their son Michael joined them, followed by twin girls, Emma and Anne, 3 years after that. The house expanded again to accommodate their growing family, and Vincent hired help for the ranch work so he could spend more time with Lillian and the children. 10 years after Lillian had stepped off that train with trembling hands, the Double H was one of the most prosperous ranches in the territory. Their home was filled with laughter, music. Lillian had insisted on bringing a piano from Cheyenne, and the constant bustle of family life. On the anniversary of their wedding, Vincent surprised Lillian with a trip to the creek where they had first begun to open their hearts to each other. He'd packed a picnic and spread a blanket under the cottonwood trees that now provided ample shade. As they watched their children play along the creek bank, Vincent pulled Lillian close against his side. "You ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "Answering that advertisement, coming west to marry a stranger?" Lillian looked up at him, this man who had grown from a cautious stranger into the love of her life, the father of her children, her partner in everything. "Never," she said with complete conviction. "My hands may have shaken when I signed that paper, but my heart has been steady ever since I found you." She leaned up to kiss him, still feeling the same thrill after all these years. "This is exactly where I'm meant to be." Vincent's arms tightened around her, his eyes reflecting the same love and wonder that had been growing between them for a decade. "I promise to treat you like gold," he murmured against her hair. "I hope I've kept that promise." "You've done better than that," Lillian assured him, watching as their oldest daughter showed the twins how to skip stones across the water's surface. "You've given me a life more precious than gold, a life filled with love." As the afternoon sun filtered through the leaves above them, casting dappled shadows on their family tableau, Lillian reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a desperate young woman signing marriage papers with shaking hands to a confident ranch wife and mother, it had been a path she could never have imagined back in Boston. Vincent Holloway, the quiet cowboy who had once been feared for his gun, was now respected for his integrity and admired for his success. And she, Lillian Abernathy Holloway, had found strength she never knew she possessed in this wild, beautiful country she now called home. When their youngest daughter ran over to show them a wildflower she'd discovered, Vincent lifted the child onto his lap with the same gentle hands that had once made Lillian feel so safe. As their daughter chattered excitedly, Lillian met her husband's eyes over the child's head and saw in them the same thought that filled her own heart. This life they had built together, this love that had grown from the most uncertain of beginnings, was the greatest treasure either of them could have imagined. And it had all started with a paper signed by shaking hands and a cowboy who had promised to treat his mail-order bride like gold, a promise he had kept every day since.